Hi everybody, this is Professor Jason Snart. I will be your instructor for English 2250, that's Intro to Creative Writing online for the spring 2017 semester here. So I will do a ton of these, pretty informal video announcements here. Some will be me as a talking head, but most of them will be a capture of our course here. So it's kind of a video of the course, but audio of me. Depending on when you're watching this, it might be a couple of days before classes start, or if you're just getting in on the 23rd, Monday the 23rd, it's just as classes get rolling. There's a couple of things that I wanted to do before we got really into the course itself. A couple of, I guess, my approaches to or concerns about teaching and learning online, and really any kind of learning, but it's sort of particular to online, or maybe a little more noticeable online, and it really doesn't have anything to do with creative writing or this particular class. It's just the online environment. So the first thing is that, and you probably already know this if you've taken classes that use Blackboard or that are entirely online, is that it's really important to feel comfortable just navigating the course. That's why it doesn't really matter what the subject matter is. It's your ability to just understand like how the course is laid out. And of course it's incumbent on me to make it as clear as possible. So part of what I want to do here is just to point you to a couple of the main areas of our course and sort of suggest how it's laid out, so that the structure and where to find things and what the expectations are, all that kind of stuff, is relatively clear to you. So you don't have to spend a lot of course time just getting comfortable navigating the space here, and you can actually get into the work and understand where to find things and sort of like work efficiently in Blackboard. The other part of teaching online, teaching generally, but again online, maybe more noticeably, is that it's really important for me to create a sense of a class, a community, just like we might feel in a face-to-face class if it's done well, where we interact with each other, we know people's names, we maybe don't see each other obviously on a regular basis like that, but we still feel connected to each other like a class would be. And actually I do think that's really important for our particular course, Creative Writing, because a lot of what we do is share writing with each other and get and give feedback. So it's really important to develop a sort of a sense of community. I was going to say a friendship, and I don't want to push it too hard, but you do sort of get to know people in a class, and I want that to happen here too. So that's part of why I do these kind of video announcements, whether it's just me talking and we're looking at the screen, and we will navigate through some stuff. You don't just have to stare at this the whole time. But there's also lots of opportunities for interaction within the course, and really our first unit isn't about creative writing so much as it is just kind of getting to know each other. So my two main purposes here are, first of all, to get you just comfortable navigating the course, right? And then to really emphasize how important it is to develop that sense of a class or a community. So the online experience isn't just like a sort of disembodied teacher or instructor somewhere who you never see or hear or interact with, and then you alone somewhere else and you never interact with classmates. That's a pretty lame way of doing it, online or face-to-face. So we want to do what we can to make sure that that isn't your experience in this course. Okay, so navigation, right? Obviously when you log in, you'll see our announcements page. That's where you'll be watching this video. Our course menu might change a little bit depending on some of the things that we're doing, so if items might move, but it's going to be basically the same kinds of things here. We'll always be at the announcements page. In the syllabus area, you can find pretty predictable syllabus kinds of things, a course description, just like it appears in the catalog. Basic course goals, which again, creative writing, you can kind of imagine what these are going to be. The textbook that we use, right, you'll find reference to this throughout the various units that we work through. And then the usual kinds of policies type things. So I'm not going to belabor all that here. You can read it right on your own time. Obviously getting the textbook is kind of the main order of business. There's no real like physical syllabus you'd want to print out. All of the details, policies, things like grading, for example, it's all built into Blackboard here. So there's no document that you have to find. Okay, I'm going to skip the rules of creative writing for right now. We'll come back to that once we get into the course. But our two main course areas over here in our menu are the units, which is where all the work is, and then the due dates, obviously when the work in those units is due. So I'll go into the due dates first of all. Okay, lots of highlighting, especially as we get started here. So each of the units, right, has its own discrete due date. You can see I tried to keep it as regular as possible just so you get into the habit, right, of when things are due. But most of our units involve, and again, this goes to my second point about kind of community building, involves some kind of interaction. So you might be posting something or doing something, but then also responding to another person's post, another person's writing, another person's work for that unit. So to make it so that we're not doing all of that at the last minute, we have a dual due date system. So you'll see, for example, Unit 1, the primary due date is Thursday, January 26th, so a few days after the classes start. But because there are reply components within that unit, and we'll take a look at the unit in just a second here, those would have a due date of the Sunday of that week. So there's always a kind of gap between when people are doing main posts and then when replies can happen. But I want to stress that as long as you're working through the material in the unit and not just jumping to the thing that you've got to do, there's nothing to say that you have to wait until Thursday or until Sunday to do each of these things. So these are like due dates, right? The outside latest you can do things, not that you have to wait or that you'd have to wait until after Thursday to do the replies. If a bunch of people have done posts on Tuesday and Wednesday and you want to jump in there on the Thursday, right, and do the reply part, then you're kind of getting ahead of the game a little bit. But obviously we work pretty methodically through our due dates. You get a little sense of kind of what each of the units is here. You'll notice that the kind of cornerstones for our course here are the workshops. So we do a fiction workshop, there's a poetry one, a creative nonfiction, so we cover a bunch of genres. And the workshops I'll explain in a later announcement, but it's a pretty traditional writer's workshop. Everybody writes something, you're in a group with other people, you exchange the writing, and everybody gets feedback from the group. It actually, in some ways, works better online than it does face-to-face because people actually have to respond in writing to the writing that you're doing. And again, we'll cover all of how that actually works. But if it seems like that workshop or that dynamic environment is really something that you could only do face-to-face, in my experience, it certainly works face-to-face, but it actually works equally, if not better, in the online environment. But it is, again, important that we start kind of getting to know each other a little bit. Okay, which brings us to Unit 1. So again, the due dates list, that's your sort of go-to place every time you log into Blackboard, looking at what's due right around the corner, reminding yourself of our dual due date system here, and you can obviously start looking ahead at when things are due, particularly something like the fiction workshop where you're writing your own short story. You don't necessarily want to wait until this one is completely done, or especially on like the Sunday, and then try to turn a short story around within that week or even less. So as we work through the earlier units, you can sort of be building towards maybe the more significant or labor-intensive work of actually writing that short story. But again, more on those details later. Okay, so the due dates tab, super important. Connected, of course, to the units, which is where all the work is. So again, I tried to lay it out sort of as transparently as possible, but it does take some getting used to if this is a layout you're not familiar with, or it was done very differently in a different class, or maybe your first online class, whatever it happens to be. So obviously we know the due dates here, and then we would click into each of the units to find out what work is required. So you can click into any unit. You can jump ahead, not to do the work, but just to see sort of what's out there. But obviously you don't need to work ahead. It usually works against you if you get too far ahead. So we're in our introductions here. I try to lay out the aims and objectives here, pretty straightforward. We're just introducing ourselves to each other. And one of the things I want to stress then is that it's a sort of a design conundrum, is you don't want so many folders within folders within folders within folders that people get sort of buried. But we also don't want just one main unit here with tons and tons and tons and tons of text to cover all the stuff we want. So I try to build maybe a couple of subfolders, but it's important to sort of remember where you are. You can also use this little breadcrumb feature, to work your way backwards. So we have a couple of different things we want to do here. There's a short survey that you can take just to sort of get us thinking about what it means to be, in this case, an online student. It's ungraded, but I do want your name and obviously what class you're in. If you're sort of concerned about things, you can obviously contact me directly as well, but it's important that you do the survey. Okay, so creating your home page. It's all in Blackboard here, so there's no special technical knowledge that you need. You'll notice that it's laid out sort of in a step-by-step, right, with images of what icons you're supposed to look for. Sometimes Blackboard changes the look of things, but not really drastically usually. And if there is a drastic change, then I try to obviously change the images, but this should walk you pretty carefully through what you want to do here, how Blackboard works. And really the important part here is you kind of tell us a little bit about yourself. You know, it's pretty informal. You can make up totally different questions. Just tell us who you are, but also to attach an image and use this little icon here to put your image right into the post, right, of your home page. Don't attach it as a file, but actually embed it so we can look at your home page and see you. This is again part of just like learning who's in the class. We'll learn about backgrounds. Maybe you went to the same school as somebody, you have the same literary interests, or, you know, whatever. Just kind of getting to know people. Okay, and so then it's important to remember that that's not all you have to do for Unit 1, so we can backtrack to the main folder here. And we also have a discussion board. It kind of duplicates the introduce yourself idea, but that's a little bit intentional because discussion boards are going to be one of the main tools that we use throughout the course. So especially if you've never done one before in Blackboard here, it's just important right off the bat to understand how they're set up, what you have to click, what they look like, all that stuff. Once you get used to it, they are pretty simple to use, but again, if you've never done it before, it takes some getting used to. So that again is part of that, like just getting comfortable, getting situated in the class. Pretty simple, right? You'll notice that some of the questions even sort of overlap from the student homepage assignment. Obviously, don't just cut and paste, right? Write something new for us here. And you'll notice that when you go into the editor, whether it's a discussion board, the student homepage assignment, whatever, the editor tends to look pretty much the same. But you can also, right, obviously include images, links to video. You can actually embed things like videos. So you can get much more creative than just always providing us with text. And notice here, we have that reply requirement, right? So again, our dual due date system, your post would be due on that Thursday, replies due at the latest by Sunday. So that gives us that nice kind of window so that we're not trying to do both posts and replies all at the same time, basically. Okay, so if we go back to our main folder, that is pretty much it for Unit 1. And then we wrap up, right? We look at our due dates, we go into Unit 2, and we're off to the races. So hopefully it'll work here. I want to make sure I set it up. If I click into the student homepage area, all right. So you're just going to be creating your journal entry, call it whatever you want. It's because you're logged in as you don't really have to flag it as you, it's going to be you. And then one little trick is there's none done yet, but right at some point you'll be able to click this little button and there'll be a list of them here in case you wanted to look at others, right, other than your own. Okay, so I'm going to cut myself off here. That's probably a lot to digest, but again, especially with online learning, it's good to take a little time just to get used to the layout, where things are, how the course sort of functions as far as where's the work, right? When's it due? What are the expectations? And most of the other things you'll see here are either like syllabus or grading kind of policy related things, or material that we'll use later, like especially the workshops, and you can read the note on feedback here as well. Okay, so it's good to meet you. Get comfortable in the course, have fun, get creative with Unit 1 here, introducing yourself to everybody, and I will talk again with everybody within the next couple days.